This podcast is made possible by the generosity of listeners and viewers like you. Kindly consider a contribution through Patreon or PayPal. Links are in the details box. Any amount is appreciated. And follow us on social media. We're on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. The handle, the Beirut Banyan. Rate and review us on Apple Podcasts. And to stay updated with video releases, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thanks for listening, and thanks for watching. I'm Rani Shatar, and this is the Beirut Banyan. I'm going to think of this episode as a unique mental gymnastics exercise because I've hosted many candidates who are running in Beirut too. I've hosted many candidates campaigning across the country. But I think, and this is my humble opinion, I think you guys are running in the most complicated district in this country. It's not because there are multiple lists, or for that matter, there's certain characters in each list. I don't think it's about ego or personality, even though that plays a role sometimes. I think it's because there's a sensitive subject that is impacting all of us, and it's very difficult to talk about it. So I'm going to try to do this carefully with both of you. I'll introduce you guys though before anything. Waddah Sadek, Khat Ahmar.
Yeah.
Iman Tabbara Waddah.
Backed by Kitli, yes.
Backed by Kitli. Yeah. I was trying to be extra careful. Backed by Kitli, fully on board with Khat Ahmar.
Yeah, I'm mainly the head of the executive committee of Khat Ahmar. And backed by Iman.
None of us are backed by any other sponsor, which is why we're here. Beirut al-Taghyir is the list. It's made up of many candidates, and actually some of them I know as friends. I wanted to select two individuals I don't know that well. I know your wider story, Waddah. I've seen you in different circles through media. Iman, I don't think I ever knew about you before the elections began. Yeah. So for me, it's actually more interesting to go down this road with two people.
Waddah.
It's okay. You are more interesting.
Well, I think both of you are in different ways, which is why I think this is unique. Let me start with the most sensitive subject, and then we can go down from there. I think there's inertia and gravity in Lebanon that is beyond politics. I think it's beyond elections, and it's beyond reform. I think there is sectarian anxiety. And I think the three of us are old enough to know what that feels like for another community that exited politics in the early 1990s. And I think it's not so unfair to characterize this community's anxieties this way. Even if the three of us here don't feel sectarian, perhaps the three of us are secular. And maybe we don't even think about these things to begin with. But I think that's a reality. And let's start with that reality. And maybe Iman, I could start with you. Did what I just say sound very outlandish? Does it sound almost dinosaurish for me to suggest that? Or do you feel the same way, that this is an uphill battle for reasons that have nothing to do with your list, or Kitli Watani sponsoring you, or you sponsoring them maybe in this list, or for that matter, the demands that we felt on the street on October 17, that this is history, its identity, and its gravity when it comes to Lebanon?
I honestly believe that we have an entrenched problem that we are not being able to get rid of, is that, let's face it, whether we like it or not, we are a sect-based identity. So as a Lebanese, we were not able to layer up these identities in order to be more comprehensive. I was having a very interesting conversation in the morning with the person who told me we have a fractured identity in terms of it's not one identity, and yet there's no common ground between these identities. So you can be an expat, a Lebanese expat, or you can be a Sunni from Beirut, or you can be a capitalist here and a socialist there. There's no coherence in our identity. And if we were to historically go back in time, ever since the Qa'im Maqamitain, we have this issue with the sects and how these sects are represented. And we were not, I don't think till now, we were able to move forward with the concept of a nation or basically who a Lebanese person is, what his duties are, and what his obligations are. So we're still at the bottom, I think, and we need to work, any candidate in parliament or any person who believes in Lebanon, and a Lebanon that represents us, has to work towards that, to layer this identity up.
So you see the problem, if that's the right word, predating all of this current mess, that this is an old issue that any election would have to confront on a good day or a bad day.
I think we need to stop living in the past and see how to live in the future for our kids' sake. And this system has proven to be extremely fragile, and I would say we coexist. It's a very fragile coexistence between these sects, because we're perpetuating a stereotype of a za'im, who happened to be previously a warlord, and so on and so forth. We were not able to move forward towards the rule of law and towards accountability, towards an actual democracy, because what we're living here, it's a delusional democracy.
I like that phrase, delusional democracy. Did what I say earlier resonate with you? And I know it sounds a bit bleak. It sounds maybe I'm applying pressure by suggesting these things, but I feel it. And I don't know if you feel it the same way I described it.
It's not pressure, it's reality. And we must know what's in the past to be able to build the future of the country. I think we were programmed since maybe 1969, I think, after the Cairo. We were built to live in a way that suddenly we can transform into small groups that they tell us you need to survive. So if you want to survive, you need to be against others. In 2018, just an example, I was asked by some of the surrounding of Saad al-Hariri about his campaign. We're not talking then. I was not close to Saad. He's a friend. I hope that he will remain after I took a decision to leave the party, but he didn't. And they said, what about the campaign? I said, I'm a Beiruti. I need to hear what you're going to do to Beirut, not just elect us because Hezbollah will take Beirut. And I don't think we can build a future living on fears. They created a small devil inside each of us that they can push a button, and this devil controls us, and we say, okay, we are Sunni, we are in Beirut, and we need to go to our Za'im to elect him, because if we don't, they will kill us, they will take Beirut, or I don't know what. Now, each one of us took a decision to do his own revolution. It's not 17th of October, it's within us. On 17th of October, we said, enough is enough.
Yeah.
We don't want to live in this Lebanon anymore. We want to change ourselves. I said it many times. In 17th of October, we started our revolution a year and a half before in Khat Ahmar, because we come from a private sector, and we saw that we were going to a full collapse in the private sector. And we represented around 70,000 employees, and we wanted to go to the street. But then 17th of October came, I was in the office, my daughter called me, she was 22, I think. She said, Dad, I'm in Riyadh Salah. I said, what are you doing in Riyadh Salah? She said, maybe we are trying to go to a better Lebanon, we are trying to do that, we are trying to do this, and maybe we'll do better than you, and we'll correct your mistakes. And this was, it went inside me. I said, we did a lot of mistakes, so let's try to do something. And I went down to 17th of October, and I think I did my own revolution inside of me and said, no, I don't want to live in such a country. My two kids are outside Lebanon now. And I promised them that I will get you back to Lebanon and you will start rebuilding this country. Actually, I don't want to rebuild the country. I want to build a new one because the base is not here.
You're both outlining something that resonates with me, which is that you have a slightly longer perspective on this country's history by simple fact that you're a little older than the average protester that joined us on the streets. And the fact that you're even able to own up and suggest things that I think many October 17 politicians are shy about. And I've seen you do it in different ways. You're honest about your earlier career. You're not hiding anything in terms of a man that you worked for, or let's say even a party that you identified with at some point. But you're also suggesting that things need to radically change too. And I appreciate both at the same time. I'm going to take this sensitive subject and make it even more sensitive. Now that you're head on into an election, almost like a circus, it's less than, it's 10 days away.
Yeah.
This will come out just a few days before, but I can imagine the pressure is so severe. And with that, you have to at least offer a rational explanation for why one particular figure exited politics. And I know that's not your burden. You're not running for that party. You're running, I think, more like individuals on a list together. But I can imagine in the background, you have to offer an explanation. And I think that explanation is very tricky in how you deliver it. So, Iman, I'm going to try to ask you this in a productive way. Are you able to put his exit, the Hariri name, which I think is so big in Lebanon, even when he's not here, are you able to somehow position his decision to leave this country, not interfering with what you still want to do, with or without him being in this country? Is there a way that you maybe sell your aspirations to a voter that doesn't necessarily legitimize anyone's exit, but still you're able to stand tall on your own? And I'm sorry to make it a very huge question, but I think this is always in the background, especially in Beirut too.
It's not personal against Hariri, whether be it Hariri, Jumblat, or any Zaim. What I'm here saying is that we need public servants. We need a functional democracy, and it's not about the people, it's about the system. We have a problem, a systematic problem, regardless of who the person is. So what I'm saying to the people is that fine, Hariri exited, it is what it is, it's his decision, okay? But it doesn't mean we have to bear the consequences or just wait for another savior to come on board, because the system of Zaim negates the public servant that I'm advocating for.
I'll push you back, since I can. My rare opportunity to do this with very bright minds. If I were to counter-argue and suggest the system has nothing to do with one man's resignation, or for that matter, the inability of reformers to seek power. If I were to position that and suggest things that have less to do with Lebanon make the system rotten, rather than the system making Lebanon rotten. And we don't even need to use the word Hezbollah. You mentioned Waddah, the Cairo Agreement, in your first sentence, I think. You went back to 1969 very smoothly. What if the structural problems to the system predate us? And we've never really talked about that issue. And it's hard to imagine a country getting better when that huge burden is on anyone living here.
Granted, we need to revise our history and learn from it. Our problem is we keep jumping from one problem to another without tackling the previous ones. For me, at a certain point, us as a Lebanese living in Lebanon specifically, we're still living in the past because we have not yet reconciled amongst each other. We have not agreed on a history book. We have not agreed on the civil war and its repercussions on all of us. So that's why we keep going back and forth. We were not able to move forward because we're still based in the past, because the same people who were warlords are now elected into parliament, into the executive office as presidents, and so on and so forth. So basically, we're still suffering from a long-term kind of civil war, whether on the streets or in the establishments. So this ruling class has to be set aside in order for people who believe in the rule of law to instill this constitution, which I think is, and I disagree with Waddah on this point, I believe to a certain extent there are foundations that we can build on. The reason is why we're not getting there is because of the people who are in power, and not only because of the system itself. We might be able to amend the system, but we will not be able to do so if these same people are still ruling us since 1975.
Can I interfere? And
of course,
I agree. I agree because I was talking about the economy. Now there is in Lebanon. We have a chance to go into leapfrogging, and leapfrogging is going to, let's say, to renewable energy.
Yeah.
So to smart government, not to e-government. So now we cannot go and bring energy to Lebanon based on what we have. So we need to really go into not restructuring, into doing a new structure. This is what I meant, but I agree that
economically,
it's not, yeah.
But let me build on what you said, Iman. I know it's not your words, but I'd like the way you're picturing something, you're describing it. I'm going to take a bit from what you said and add to it. You're running and trying to overcome one of the few politicians in Lebanon who left the scene but was not part of that warlord group, let's say, obviously associated with failure. And I think October 17, the fact that this man was the front and he was the face of the government made him so exposed anyway that it was a natural end to that political career. And it probably made sense. But then again, I can imagine anybody that represents a community at large in Lebanon, even if that language doesn't appeal to us right now. And I know that the Zaim stuff doesn't resonate well in 2022, yet it's still here. When that kind of figure leaves for reasons that may have to do less with Lebanon's structure itself, how do you as a politician overcome that when you're discussing politics?
First, it's his choice to leave politics. Partially, I think he didn't leave. He's still working, is still doing a lot of things under the table. But he doesn't have the right to close a party. What he did, he said, okay, I'm leaving politics and I'm closing a party, a full party for Lebanon. I don't want to say a Sunni party. I want to say a national party. So he doesn't have the right to do that. He left them confused, and they don't know how to react. The problem of the future party of Saad al-Hariri, for the last 15 years, everything he did was based on reaction, not on action, not on planning, not on creating young leaders. While he was one of the few, I think, or the only leader who can create new leaders. He's a young man. He was born and raised outside, and I was expecting that he was really one of us, the people who want to change. So yes, he left. He will leave a gap, and for a good time, not for a long time. He will leave a gap. What we're trying to do, we're trying to tell people that the change now should come. I know it won't be fast. We need time. We need to build. And we need to pay for our mistake, all of us. We all did mistakes. The Lebanese people, we all did mistakes. Because we created those 5, 6, 7, 8 leaders. The problem of Saad, he didn't have a strong structure inside his party or inside the Sunni community, while the rest were really leaders who were able to let their population community live with the idea that we cannot live without you. For Walid Jumlat, they are minority, and he's always saying, without me, you will not be able to live in this country. For Hezbollah, it's a religious, they are waiting for something, and everyone are really related to the party because of that. Amal, they don't want to go back to Mahrumin, and so it goes on. For Saad, he doesn't have a strong base behind him. We're trying to build on that you need to go to a project that can build the country enough with the leaders. It's not easy. We're talking to people all the time, but it will need more time.
The reason I I rarely even bring up his name in any episode. I've done over 300 episodes. But I think this is a unique opportunity to really tackle the psychology of this moment. Because in my mind, and I'd like to know if this resonates with you, Iman, I don't think of him as a consequence of war. So when Michel Aoun fled the country in 1990 after spending a year at the French embassy, that is a direct consequence of war, although his responsibility is clear, but he chose exile. Samir Jaja is thrown in jail in the early 1990s. That's a consequence of the Syrian occupation. But I think of those two characters as almost the trust that they establish while not being on the political scene grows when they're away from the scene. And I'm trying to think about why this issue is pervading Lebanon. Does it even sound remotely possible to you that no matter what you do in Beirut too, or no matter what you do in Lebanon, there's still a de facto situation where a community feels like its de facto leader paid a price, even if he chose to depart himself, and that is a hurdle that no one can really overcome because it transcends us. And it may even go beyond Saad Hariri himself. He may not even fully appreciate what the void does. And I don't know if I'm asking it the right way, but I get the feeling that if we're going to only talk about system inefficiency and structural problems and leave that huge thing out of the conversation, it may not resonate the way it should, at least in Beirut too.
When those who were in charge had to leave the country or chose to leave the country, they chose based on principles. It was very clear cut. Today, when Saad al-Hariri left the country, whether by choice or not, first of all, it's not clear what's the plan. Was it a tactical move? Was it a strategical move? It's not enough to restrict the Sunni constituency and turn it into one person and then have that one person exit without an actual plan. See, if the boycott was clear and he said, listen, I'm boycotting because I want to, I have a problem with the system, I want to delegitimize the elections, so on and so forth. If he gave valid reasons, then I think his exit would have been more beneficial to him and to Lebanon as a country. But the fact that he just decided to up and go without valid reasons or without a valid strategy on how this exit is beneficial to people who trusted him and who believed in him, then I think that's extremely detrimental.
I've never heard that before, and I really appreciate that answer. I think that is probably the clearest problem in this whole story. I respect you even pointing right at the problem itself. Does that sit well with you, Waddah?
Of course, this is why we had Iman in the list.
By the way, that's it.
I was going to say, can I hire you for my own lists later?
Because she's smart. So
that was a good answer.
You know. Let me tell you something. We've been in the streets, in the offices, trying to build a coalition for a year and a half now. I took breakfast with Iman, and we decided to go together to the list. And we are communicating and working together, I think, better than 90% of all the groups and the people that I've worked with for the last 2 years and a half.
And it's this very frank, blunt communication that helps, I'm guessing, in trying to get straight to the point.
I think we have common ground, and that's why we get along well. So, to me, I'm extremely transparent. I'm not sensitive, so I take things as is, and I build on them to better myself. So it's not an issue. If anyone has any critique, I take it wholeheartedly, honestly. And I think we're together, all of us, we're trying to work towards a better Lebanon. Because when he wants his kids back, it's the same for me. And we're working towards that goal. So again, I think we have to, at a certain point, cut ties with our past and look into our future and see how we can build on that, because we cannot stay living in the past.
Thank you for that very frank, refreshingly straight to the point description of, I think, the other elephant in the room.
It's such a tiny room with so many elephants.
The other room with the other elephant.
You know, Ronnie, what she said, the description that she gave is exactly the reason why I left.
Why you left the Future party. But you left before
Yeah,
October 17,
yeah.
if I understood that right.
6-7 years before
Right.
October 17.
So she, in other words, her way of analyzing his departure later is what drove you away from that party before he left.
Yeah, because nothing was clear.
Right.
No planning. We were trying to do something. They didn't want to do that. So he left the same way. He was leading the party, and he was leading not only the party, most of the time he was leading Lebanon.
Yeah.
For the last 15 years.
I thank you for letting me start the episode with this huge question, because I think once you get this out of the way, it's easier to dissect other issues, but I think it's equally important to address it. It's the first time. Let's get into what issues you think matter most for the voters in Beirut too. And I'm going to just speculate here. It's not just about Hezbollah.
No.
And I'm going to take it as even a step further, that even if it was just about Hezbollah, I don't think an MP running for parliament right now should have all the tools necessary to address that huge geopolitical problem.
Yeah.
That's a problem that transcends Lebanon.
I agree.
But even when it's on the table, what are the other topics that come up that are pressing to Beirut too? And in your experience, do they stand out a bit when it comes to other districts? Or is it a national problem that sort of pervades across? And maybe Waddah, I can start with you.
Beirut is the capital. So it is a little bit different from the other districts because everyone's coming to Beirut, all the Lebanese are here. So it needs to be really an organized capital that can attract all the people. And tourism is starting here most of the time.
Oh, do you hear tourism in the conversations when you're on the ground? Do you hear those topics coming up?
Now,
when you engage voters, I'm curious what sort of...
We cannot even talk about tourism.
Right, yeah.
But at the end, this is one of the main income of Lebanon, the tourism. So we cannot talk about Hezbollah. Everyone is asking about that. But we need to be realistic. We can do nothing. We can just say that we are against the arm of Hezbollah.
Well, you guys are a little too honest for me. So wait, I don't usually interrupt this much.
Okay.
I think you're the first person who has admitted you don't have a policy to address this huge nightmare.
I have.
You don't have a policy you can convince a voter with and say, I can do this for you.
Let me tell you what I'm saying to voters. We should wait for a regional deal to solve the problem of Hezbollah.
Do you suggest to the voter, let's say, we should wait, or do you take it a slightly different way and say, I want to be part of that drive?
Okay, we need to talk about 3 points. First, we need to be inside the parliament to take a chair when it comes to negotiating Lebanon for the whole deal of the region. We cannot let them go alone and do what they did in Doha 2008. Because what we're living now is because of the Doha deal. 2, we need to tell our voters that we have a lot of things to do before going to Hezbollah. I don't think that we don't have electricity because of Hezbollah. It's because of corruption. Okay, they are protecting corruption, but there are other parties who are doing that. I don't think that what's in the streets of Beirut now, actually there is nothing in the streets of Beirut now because of Hezbollah. We don't have police in the streets, you know. We don't see police. We don't have security. It's not because of Hezbollah. We can do that with the municipality. We can do that with the mayor. We can do that with a lot of NGOs in Beirut. And you know what they did after the explosion of 4th of August. So we can do that. It's not Hezbollah. It's us. It's the corruption. It's the parties who brought that to us.
Could I take liberty in challenging you on this?
Yeah,
even though you're the one running.
Can I?
Sure.
But can
Please.
I talk about
of course.
the third point? And we're telling them, okay, you say now you can do nothing because you have Hezbollah, the monster, sitting there and not allowing you to do anything. Let's consider that we have a deal. In a year, 2 or 3, we should be prepared. And we should be ready to go there. Plus, if we start building our country, you know that then they will get weaker. Each time you achieve something in the country, okay, each time you succeed to do, let's say, a smart government, they will get weaker. Each time you succeed to do a law of I don't know what, they will get weaker. And this is how we can be really fighting against Hezbollah.
I'd like to, before we get to Iman, I want to diplomatically dispute something you said, which is, I think it's an important discussion. I think it's not so bleak the way you described it, in that they have little effect when it comes to the general state collapse and everything we're experiencing. You outlined the obvious examples. No security at night, no electricity, there's pollution levels and environmental disaster that you wouldn't naturally extend to Hezbollah, which I think is true. That it's hard to think of them when you think of an unsafe city that they're not even involved with directly, at least when it comes to their security. But you also mentioned 2008 and the Doha Agreement, and I'm glad you're referencing these important years. In my mind, that's one of the rare occasions where the state tried to interfere with a sub-state group that is preventing institutions from functioning. And that was met with such violence and bloodshed. And it's been rare to see the state doing its job since in an effective way. And I'll take it even a step further. The rare occasion where the state still sort of pops its head and says, I'm still here. You mentioned the port blast. Tariq Bitar is one of those rare occasions, rare human beings in this country that is trying to do his job. And then you have Tayouni in October, another round of bloodshed, which to me makes it seem like, even if they're not directly involved with collapse, I see their burden on the country as contributing heavily to the mess we're living in. Now, is thinking about it that way sit well with you? Or do you still see it as, no, you can do municipal governance while there's still that huge burden on everyone?
Tariq Bitar is a big case. When we talk about Tariq Bitar, we talk about maybe a big issue for Hezbollah, because they are really involved in the explosion of 4th of August. They had something inside. I don't know what. And they don't want us to know what. And Tariq Bitar maybe was getting really close to us, to that. So they stopped everything. This is where they interfere. They interfere on a less, but you know, let's say the municipality took a decision to have some electricity in Beirut like Zahli. They will not say no, because they have nothing to. It's not because they like us or the country, but they don't want to go into such details. This is what I was saying. It's okay. You have a lot of members of the parliament who are not Hezbollah. Did they do anything after the explosion? The parliament members of Beirut, nothing, zero. They didn't do anything.
So you see responsibility as still there, and it should be there even when you have that huge burden.
Of course.
And they should go hand in hand.
We still have a margin. We still can work for Beirut.
Yeah.
We still can do something, even in the small details in the street. It's our normal daily life. We cannot even live that. We cannot even live a life going out of our home. They have 650 municipality police. Where are they? We see no one. This is not because of Hezbollah. This is because of corruption, because of a lot of... Look, the establishment is based on I want really talk about the system. Maybe we don't have a problem with our system.
We'll get back to that, but I'd like Iman, I'd like to hear your experience with voters and what those conversations are like, assuming that Hezbollah comes up, even Hariri comes up, but the more local concerns that come up as well.
You'd be surprised. I don't think you'd be surprised. I think currently today the economic issues are pressing on the voters, on the Lebanese and on the Beirutis. And granted, they ask you that the bigger frame or your program that you believe in a sovereign state. But today, these people, they want to eat, drink, have electricity, and not die in front of hospitals. So this is their concerns today. And yesterday, I was talking to someone, and he was like, fine, we all know what's wrong. We're all dealing with these burdens on daily issues. What is your plan, step by step, on how to move forward and have this economy be able to support what we need? Keep in mind the minimum wage now is no longer acceptable. Electricity now is something.
If it comes on an hour, we're happy.
Absolutely, you cannot pay for the generator for the monthly fees, even if you have minimal. I think what Waddah is saying is that even in our basic living rights, to a certain extent, there lies a responsibility on these MPs and on our municipality. We're not talking about big decisions. We're talking about a traffic light, a pot in the street. These are our basic rights. And I believe that because of Hezbollah's burdens and pressures and this confessional system that is in place and the clientelism that is in place, we are not able to move forward. We are at a state of paralysis.
You know, Iman, I appreciate two things you brought up, and this will actually tie things back to the system a little later. I want to save it for the last because I think that's an existential discussion. It's worth exploring. But you mentioned something which is actually, I think, timed well. You're talking about local issues on the ground. And I think it was yesterday, the party that is best associated with local issues on the ground, Medinati, or formerly Beirut Medinati, could barely persuade enough people that it had to withdraw from Beirut too. And that to me is the most locally oriented politics, I think, or that experiment is the only one that's really happened in Lebanon. They could not really sell the message effectively. Is it a challenge for Beirut Tahrir, let's say as a list, to also go down that road and say we're more capable? And maybe it's less to do with recognizing their name, more to do maybe with your various backgrounds, or maybe that there's not so much rigidity within this list. Because you come from a lot of these sort of individuals that I've come across are not the crowd that I would expect to easily sit together, yet they do sit together and they sit well together. Does that make it easier to appeal to a wider, let's say, a wider voting base in Beirut too?
Well, definitely our list is made out of 21, we're a coalition, 21 groups. And we basically represent Beirut in its diversity, which is something we were able to manage, and this is something I'm extremely proud of. If we go back to the issue of Beirut Medinati or Medinati, I believe Beirut Medinati truly want what's good for this city. And I think based on that, they were able to shift their decision from moving forward in these elections and withdrawing their candidacy for the better good. So this is something I commend them for, honestly. And I think we are all aware of how hard or how uphill this battle is. But still, I believe that Medinati, they have their structural values, they worked on the grounds and all of that. But at this point, we need to work more with each other later on to even push forward. Because again, this paralysis that we're living in is not easy to break away from or to even diagnose properly.
That wider coalition which you described, has that been an advantage in general in having this list a little more accepted, let's say, than other lists that are not as maybe not as well known? Do you think that broader support base is what allows your list to actually pursue this?
I think I can't compare myself to other lists. I think we are unique and different, and we're providing for a new way of doing things, whereby you agree on a wider political sphere. We're not a political party per se.
Right. Yeah.
So So it's not easy
Maybe
for people.
that's the advantage, actually.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
but it's not easy for people to say, well, who's your tête de liste?
Hmm.
Who's the person
Mm.
in charge? And it's hard for me to explain that we're all in it together, like 11 soldiers, and you said that once. We're
And
all,
11 at the least.
Absolutely. So this is how we're operating.
You know, I didn't think about that. I never thought of this the way you said it. There's no natural name that comes up as the name
Yeah.
behind the list. How about your experience? And we mentioned this briefly before we started recording. I think the way you said it was almost poetic, that we spent too much time negotiating lists and now we don't have enough time to actually campaign. Had we had 2 more months, we would do better.
A lot, yeah.
And you're not the only person I've heard say this. In multiple districts, that has come up. I had Verena Al-Amir sitting here, running in Metin. She thinks that if she needed 2 more months to
Yeah.
make her name more accessible. Could you give me a bit of flavor, let's say, in the list formation and how you saw things moving and what you would have preferred to see? Because 10 days from now, I think this whole storm will pass and we'll have a lot of time to reflect on everything that went wrong. But what about from your eyes on the ground, trying to do this?
For the first time, I've done maybe 5 or 6 elections. For the first time, we start the election fully exhausted. Seriously. Negotiations were not easy. We're not expecting that. We expected to finish everything and all the lists and coalition maybe max by January. And we had a date in, if I remember, in 15 January to announce it all over Lebanon. Or before that, I think.
So 5 months ago was the
Yeah.
first
Announcement of the
Wow.
final lists
The launch
all
date.
over Lebanon.
Oh,
We were launching
wow.
our list.
It was supposed to happen then.
Yeah. So, and it didn't.
Yeah.
Just imagine if we were mature enough to do that. We are not mature.
But I'm
Unfortunately.
going to guess this is not about Beirut too. It's the country
It's
all
all
over.
over the country because it
I
was.
think it's not about only maturity. There are so many variables happening right now. Whether
See what
regionally-
she should go to the parliament. She knows how to say it.
No, these are just big words that she put together in one sentence. It
Yeah,
sounds.
and she answered,
I
yeah.
didn't even finish
You
my
even,
sentence.
yeah, that wasn't it.
Thanks
There are
God.
variables like.
Thanks God you didn't ask me
Guys,
about Medina.
Guys,
Oh.
the grounds are shifting on daily basis. The grounds under us are shifting. So we're adjusting as we go along. It's not easy. I think this I like the word in Arabic, dababi, this fogginess, is still ongoing, and it has been since probably before January. So this has dragged, and nothing is helping us, whether internally or regionally or even internationally. So again, Lebanon suffers from anything that happens outside.
We started meeting in April 2020, before the explosion. Okay.
Oh,
To be able to have a program, a unified program, and to put the same target
as
for all of us,
Khat Ahmar.
as everyone.
No, April 2020, you were thinking about the elections.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
We're thinking about how to have a kind of a coalition
Yeah.
to start planning for the elections. And then the explosion came, and we continue to try, but we failed every time.
But what about Beirut too?
Okay.
This delicate, I mean, up until yesterday, there were 2 lists that are made up of very small, very unlikely victories. That was the Memphid list, Citizens in the State, and the Medinati list, which I think only 2 members are still running from. There are still too many lists in Beirut too. At least my understanding of it, that this should be an easier sell. And does it simply have to do with figures that served in the state before that are too visible, and that's just a red line, that you can't really hold hands with someone who's very maybe aggressive in his language, like Fouad Mersoumi, and we can talk about that a bit later, or Fouad Sanyoura in the background of a list, that these are 2 figures that you just don't want to deal with. You want to go pretty much on your own in a way that makes sense.
Are you sure you want to ask me such questions?
I'd rather ask you this question, yes.
I'd rather you don't.
Yeah. And if it doesn't make any sense, I'll be like, sorry,
Okay.
I can beep it when
There
you
is
start
only
cursing.
one list, is our our list that has a program and a real intention to change. Okay, and I mean it. I sat with Fouad Makhzoumi maybe 8 times, and with his team, and they were asking me all the time to join him. And I said, I cannot. I come from a different background. I have a group and groups that I represent, and you are not the one that we want to be with.
But there is still that attempt at forging a list, even if you didn't say yes, that you're sitting with him.
Of course.
Let's say from the...
I sat with Gibran Bassil, so I sit with everyone. This is the worst.
That's,
This is the worst.
Yeah.
When you sit with Gibran Bassil, you can sit with anyone on planet Earth.
It's hard for me to seeing you on that list.
I
wouldn't
wouldn't
admit-
about the list.
Right.
It was 2 years ago. And
Okay.
he asked, let's have a meeting, because we were really aggressive against him, against everyone. We were the first one to do media campaigns against the 6. And we broke the taboo.
But you're okay. So
Even Hassan Nasrallah.
you're sitting with Makhzoumi, but you
Yeah.
can't see eye to eye from the beginning.
Yeah.
I'm going to guess there was even little or no negotiations with the Fouad Senyora's list,
No.
Beirut Twajeh, whatever it's called.
No.
Yeah. So there's a red line there, at least when it comes to that list. Makhzoumi is out. You're left with, I think, a very difficult battle. And is that something you just accept?
Let's ask everyone one question. Are you going to elect Nabi Berri? If they say no, you can sit with them, because this is where we start the change. When we say we will not elect Nabi Berri. And I think there is one list now that will say we will not elect Nabi Berri. I think 2.
So
Let's
program
say,
and
us.
principle that you would not re-elect the Speaker of Parliament.
Yeah,
and those are the two
not
things.
Because we don't want we don't want to elect Nabi Berri, this is clear, but it's the meaning. It has a big meaning that you want to change the 30 years he's been here all the time.
Yeah.
We're bored. Let's say he's doing a good job. We're bored. He's killing us of being boring. He's him everywhere, every time, and doing nothing.
So those are two things you can point at. Say you're the only list that said that straightforwardly.
Because you ask about Makhzoumi.
Yeah.
We all know that Makhzoumi met with Gibran Bassil a year ago and Hezbollah and asked to be a prime minister, and this is his target, just to be a prime minister. And on the 16th of May, he will go back and sit with them to be a prime minister. So we cannot go there. It's his right. It's his option. He can do that. It's in politics. But we cannot be in such a place. So we chose to be here, and we know what we're going to do. And we are a part of a big coalition, and we have a plan of 3 phases. I can talk about it now.
Yeah, actually, maybe I can ask both of you about it, since I'm guessing it's a big enough conversation. So, Iman, when you're delivering the message beyond what Waddah said, no Speaker of Parliament renewal, and a plan that I think no other list actually, I think, in Beirut has, other than the Citizens in a State one, which is a plan that is a parallel plan. It's a different way of looking at planning.
They are doing a polling, not an election.
Yeah. That's well said, actually. I appreciate that. Yeah, that's good. Yeah. I'm going to take these quotes from you guys. They're not bad. I'll use them somehow in my own life.
They're going to pay for them?
This one I can't.
Let's copyright them.
This one I'm going to steal.
Okay, you can.
I'll attribute it to you.
Yeah, okay.
In a very classy way.
Vote for Waddah. Vote for Iman.
That would be it. Vote for Waddah. Yeah, polling. Could you outline the policies or the plan the way you see it when you're campaigning? Because I would always like to imagine myself in a room where there's skeptical voters, and you're maybe not a household name. Yeah. You're somebody that I think has to build trust, which is not easy. And then after that, you have to actually show that you're serious about this. So what are those, how would you describe that to a voter?
Well, I think our program is based on specific pillars. A sovereign state, a rule of law, free economy, yet responsible at the same time, sustainability, and how to move forward with a country that no longer looks like us or represents us. So these are the pillars that our program are based on. I think, surprisingly, yes, I'm not a household name for the very simple reason that I lived my life up till 2017 in Saudi, and I came back here, and I'm a very private person. I'm an extremely private person. And if you do your research about me, you find nothing. You find some things.
The National Bloc, I think, is so happy to have you on board that they've made you now, like, in everyone's feed. You're sponsored all over the place. I'm like, yes, she's coming on the podcast.
So,
goodbye, privacy.
Yeah, absolutely. And because I'm a lawyer, I cannot utilize my work or my cases in a way to serve politics. So I'm bound by discretion, I'm bound by secrecy. And that's why I try as much as possible to dissociate from my political decision to go on board in this candidacy and my actual professional work, because they do not mix at all.
Yeah.
So going back to where we were, so these are the main pillars. But like I was saying before, at this point, if this country was able to provide for its citizens equally the basic rights, I assure you the issue of Hezbollah will not be as flagrant or highlighted as much as it is right now.
In terms of campaigning, or in general? In
terms of campaigning and in terms of general, because now I was a couple of days ago, someone was saying, they're like, listen, your speech about public servants and accepting others, and this is not, it's not being received well. You need to play on emotions, you need to play on the sectarian thing, you play to base it on fear. And I was like, I cannot perpetuate this system that we keep falling into, and it does not represent me or my beliefs, my set of beliefs. And what we're trying to say today with this list is that the norms that we have gotten accustomed to are not normal, nor acceptable, nor okay for people who want to live in a state that provides and every citizen has duties and obligations. We cannot keep doing what we have been doing and expect different outcomes. This is the exact definition of insanity. We need to find common grounds with everyone. I'm a Beiruti, I'm a Sunni Beiruti. It does not mean I have the right to cancel out a Shia from the Jnub, nor do I want to. I want to see how together we can build a proper country for all of us. Once you're able to remove all these filters or all these preconceptions and bridge the gap between what he believes in or what I believe in, and you find this common ground, you're able to connect on a basic level. And I think this is what we need to do in Lebanon. We need to connect on a basic level.
I'm going to take from that and try to go big here. And maybe it's a segue also to the system, the way the three of us see it. And we may not see it the same way. You're speaking a language that I think it's appealing in terms of bringing what seems to be differing ideas or differing communities together so that they can be more harmonious. And I heard you say it earlier, you hinted at it, that if we go down that road and focus on state infrastructure the way you see it, even something like Hezbollah would be easier to tackle and it would fade from the conversation. I hope I said that right.
That's right.
I wholeheartedly disagree. Now, I'm going to be extra diplomatic here because you guys are both refreshingly blunt. So I'll be
as blunt.
I'll caress my bluntness. I'm not good at being blunt, but I'll explain myself. I don't think Lebanon, the way we understand Lebanon, has any communal prejudice against others the way that kind of experience happens to Lebanese there. And I don't think we have any differences that are fundamental to the point that we don't govern properly. Now, I'm going to go bigger. Waddah mentioned earlier 1969. I don't think the three of us were alive back then. I don't think any of us were alive back then. You were. Okay, 1968 you were born?
Yeah.
That's not bad, huh? Because you're young. Yeah, so none of us know what Lebanon was like when the last hint of sovereignty faded. We haven't grown up in that Lebanon. And it was probably wobbly. It was probably inefficient. I'm going to guess it was sluggish. And a lot of the problems we still talk about probably predate 1969. But I think that kind of a state was capable of reforming. And I think we talk about sectarianism as if it was an existential burden from the beginning to the end. And we need to overthrow the sectarian order to move forward. I don't think any of that stuff is real. And the reason I say it in such an outrageous way is because I think the more we try to deliver the civil state secularism narrative to a Lebanese audience, the less we sell the story. And the reason I say that is because I don't think the word sectarian is bad.
I agree.
Now, okay, so let's, okay,
I
so,
agree.
yeah, and I'll
But
say...
I don't want to throw it out. I
Yeah.
want to layer it.
Okay, fair enough. Let me say one more thing and then I'll, because you're being patient with me. I think...
I'm not.
You're both being patient with me. I think that's been the toughest challenge for any individual or any group post-October 17, which is to try to offer an alternative when there's a reality that I think is not necessarily bad. So, the language of reform, I think, is more meaningful maybe than the language of getting along or conflict resolution. For example, no one even talks about Ta'if in a good way. Ta'if is not bad.
I agree.
At all.
3 pillars of Ta'if were never implemented the way they should have been. The Syrian withdrawal took 15 years, not 2 or 3. Hezbollah grew rather than decline. And the thing that I think is always left out of the room, should be right in the middle, is the Senate. And that's sectarian reform. It's not abandonment, it's reform. So
The civil state.
the Senate that would make it
Majlis
easier.
al-Shuyukh.
Yeah, but the civil state is the most important thing in the Taif because it will solve most of the issues.
The civil state, my reading of Ta'if, and maybe I'm wrong here, but my reading is that that's the end goal. That's the outcome of those 3 steps towards a civil state. It's not the
Mm.
it's not the
Starting
first step.
point.
But
Yeah.
the end goal was supposed to be 10 years ago or 15 years ago.
Oh yeah, even more now.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. So in that language, and when it comes to what happened October 17, and now campaigning, is that part of the reason why the appeal is not as strong as all of us thought it would be? That we're not betting on a sizable victory and pardon. We're now talking in terms of one hand, maybe individuals rather than a movement. Does it have anything to do with that? That maybe too many are too opposed to words that are not as bad as we think they are, and that includes sectarianism, and that secularism maybe is not the word most Lebanese want to hear.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry to throw that all on you,
No.
but could you take from that and say whatever you'd like?
All right. So whenever you talk to Beiruti voters in terms of a secular approach, this scares them because there is a misconception about secularism. They believe that this is atheism. And this is something very important, and we need to raise awareness. When I talk about a civic state, it does not mean a state that does not respect different religions. So I think our issue here is we need to move towards a cultural shift, a socio-economic, political shift, cultural shift. And I don't think we're today at the tipping point where we can say we can do that. And that's why we're going to talk about a handful or 2 handfuls of people who believe in that change and so on and so forth. Because the grounds are not ready yet for that shift, right? We need to address a lot of things. We need to dissipate that fear of the other.
But
this is important because
my concern is that the sectarian parties that we seem to hate the most are the ones that grow when sectarianism is being frowned upon. So the Lebanese forces is now growing sizably. And that could be one of the most sectarian language parties in Lebanon. And that to me is almost like you would think that that would be on the decline, but it seems to be on the rise.
Because we go back to our basic intrinsic issues, whereas when you scare someone, by default, you're going to have a responsive thing where you want someone to protect you.
When you don't have strong institutions, you will look for the party to protect you. And this is what they are doing. Imagine that we go to the parties or to the Zama, or maybe the people around them because we cannot reach the Zama, to go into a hospital.
Yeah.
And this is a right that we have. Our government should give us all our rights, not them. So they built a community based on asking for our right as a service from them. I agree with everything you're saying. I agree about Taif. But for now, we have, again, the realities that we should live in.
Yeah.
We have a plan. We have a plan, actually. Not like Saad. We have our own plan, Saad al-Hariri. So, because...
Should I embed a photo on, like, just like a...
Look, first, it's like we are in a small castle, and we have the enemy all around us. We cannot think about what's behind the enemy for now. We should think about protecting ourselves inside this castle. So to do that, we need to defend it. Our first mission when we go into the parliament, all of us, is to protect our constitution because they want to change that. Is to protect our identity because they want to change that. Is to be able to bring a government that has some plans to protect the country. A plan that we can, just a small one, we can survive this period through a good economy plan, through, I don't know, they should at least bring people who are experts in that. It's not them to do it. So they don't know how to do it. They don't have the intention and they don't know. You know, a lawyer is doing our financial plan. It's ridiculous. You know that a lawyer was doing our financial...
What's wrong with lawyers? What's wrong with lawyers?
Sorry.
They can do the financial plan. They are amazing. You know that our Minister of Finance was a lawyer. The
Actually,
most
he used to
critical
be
period.
my economics teacher back then in AUB.
Who?
Yusuf Khalil.
Ali Hassan Khalil. No, I'm talking
Yusuf
about Ali
Khalil.
Hassan Khalil. No. I'm talking about the most critical period
أنا كنت شوفه AUB all the time.
in the history of Lebanon. The most critical period between 2014, I think, or 13, and 2019.
Yeah.
Our Minister of Finance was Ali Hassan Khalil, who's a lawyer, and we don't want to talk about his university back then during the war. So this is how they were building the country around us. What we're saying that we need to do that to protect our identity, to bring a really good government, and to bring a real president of the country, not like the one we have now.
So I'll assume, let's go big here. You both enter parliament. Let's gamble, right?
Okay.
You're both in parliament together. Maybe like punching each other in the background.
More like working together.
More like
probably.
Yeah.
And you have a few, let's make it 15. These are now overly optimistic figures. Not 15 including Kata'ib, not the independents that are running all over the place. The hardcore 17th October crowd.
Yeah.
Maybe you're not as hardcore as others that will sit with you too. Okay. These are the October 17 block.
Okay.
Do you think of yourselves as, or do you think of individual role as applying pressure on the majority within parliament the way it was tried before? Meaning this very small victory for Paula Ya'ubian, or for that matter, that huge victory in 2009 and earlier 2005. Not the independents back then, but the majority trying to apply some pressure. And that majority did not succeed in both rounds. 2018, you had one person doing maybe trying to say the right thing. The country collapsed. What makes 2022 any different? Whether it's you know what, whether it's 15 or whether it's even bigger, what does that translate to in parliament?
Okay, the opposition, if you want to call it the opposition, never had the majority. If we're talking about 14th of March, they never had the majority. Because let me tell you why. In 2005, during the election, they had this, what they call it, the electoral coalition, quattro,
حلف
We
الرباعي.
were in the
Yeah.
streets, in the streets, and they were doing that. So the parties of 14th of March killed 14th of March, okay? And they did that all over in the government of 2019 and 9 and 10. They gave them, Saad al-Hariri gave them the Samul Wazir al-Malak, okay? And then he resigned and everything fell apart. In 2016, they did the compromise with Hezbollah. 2017 and 18, they did the compromise of the president. 2008, they did the compromise of Doha. So it was never a majority or a minority. They are all together.
You just listed 5 things that are the opposite of what you just said. You said the parties killed March 14, but you just listed 5 events where Hezbollah killed March 14.
No, he didn't force them to do the coalition with him on the election of 2005. They did it because they need more MPs.
Oh, you're talking about, I see. So I misunderstood. So the victory, in other words, it was never a majority number within
they sold us. They took the victory for their own benefits.
Yes.
So they took the victory. They told Hezbollah, okay, keep on having your arms, keep on having your army, but we need to take our share of the country. This is the combination of
I won't be
militia and mafia and militia.
I'll try a few minutes on this subject only because it comes up a lot. Okay. That is maybe unintentionally avoiding the capabilities Hezbollah has on politics. You have 2006, a disaster in the country that leads to protests on the street, a delegitimization of the government. 2008, we talked about it a lot. Doha. What happens in Doha starts in Hamra.
Why did you go to 2006? If we continued on fighting in 2005, we were winning. Why did we give them that power to go to election with them, and then we say, no, we were mistaken. And they told me that sentence, we were mistaken. They didn't kill Rafi al-Hariri about Hezbollah. I'm not accusing them. It's the world is accusing them, the international community.
Oh, I think I understood.
They told me, I said, why did you do that? They didn't do it. Syria did it. This is the answer I received. And then after the election, they said, yeah, they did it.
So you see the negotiations that they did with Hezbollah as defeating the majority aspiration in parliament. 2009.
Yeah, they took
within a year, I think, Hezbollah leaves because of the special tribunal verdict. Yeah. But 2008, the only reason we even talk about Doha is because that's the last time the state tried to do something against Hezbollah. I guess it's not a very coherent question, but I'm trying to think what could happen now for a group of individuals that is different. Because I think you're going to stand for the same exact principle, but it'll probably hit the same wall.
Why?
Hezbollah has not changed in a way that is better for reform.
Okay, but we did. They didn't change. We did. We have first. You know that over just social media, how many laws they were trying to do, and we were able to stop it. Only over social media. They are that afraid. They cannot go to a restaurant. They cannot go to streets. Do you think they are really in that power? Okay, they have their missiles, but they cannot use their missiles inside the country. They can use their power of frightening people. We didn't. He said, you are Americans. He said, you are Israelis. He said, you're taking money from embassies. He didn't believe himself. And we didn't even react to that, and we continued on doing that. I
like that you said we changed. That's something that is, you're not willing to negotiate the way that others...
Never. Believe me, and I'm saying this here. the first time our group or our bloc will do a compromise, I will resign. If I reach the
I see.
parliament.
So that would be the difference, that you would step down rather than become the face of failure.
It's just we had a war in the street, and we are moving that to inside the parliament to open a new fight inside the parliament. And I know that there will be parties like Lebanese forces. We can meet. We can agree with them maybe on 80% of the laws inside the parliament, because we have things in common, and with others. We need to have the third of the parliament. This is extremely important. We need to have the third of as opposition, the third of the parliament, and we can lead them. By the way, we can lead them.
Third meaning,
because we will not compromise. They will not be able to compromise.
So that's October 17 plus the regime parties that you can work with within parliament that make sense to what you stand for. Okay, that would probably reach a third. If on a very
it would, and we need to stop changing the identity of the country. They are trying to take us to another place. It's not Lebanon. It's not how we want Lebanon to be.
I'll wrap it up with maybe two questions, and they can tie in together. The first is, maybe it's a delicate question. I think a lot of people that have expertise in different fields. Iman, in the legal world, you're a lawyer. Waddah, you have your private world. You have also a private enterprise, but you're also a media person. You have a skill set that both, I don't think, necessarily mean politics. These are expertise or skills that survive with or without this journey right here. And I think I can extend that to everyone I know running for parliament, that they come from different backgrounds and they have different skill sets. But it's always a question on my mind that I don't know if that's really what politics is about in Lebanon. And maybe you could tell me a bit, in your way, on your terms, your own personal journey in trying to become political in Lebanon. Because it's hard to be a household name, even when you're from an established legacy, let's say. And when you're in the name, or when you're on TV or on billboards, it's not necessarily favorable. I mean, we're making fun these days about the new kids that are trying to do it. I think all of us are watching Michel Mour on Twitter and Facebook, and we're seeing him fumble and stumble, but he has that natural backing. We all know who he is. Yeah. We know his father, his grandfather, we know his relatives. This is new terrain for experts that are not politics per se. So maybe I could start with you, Waddah. You've been on the other side. You've covered politicians from a media man's sort of footing. And now you're trying to persuade an audience to vote for you. Do you think you have that kind of advantage, that you're not maybe so soured in the politics terrain? Or is it maybe a disadvantage that this is really fresh for you?
This is why I said we're not mature enough to be able to go faster in building our coalition. And when I said mature, I meant politically mature. The problems that we faced, if we really had more experience on the other side, because I was mainly in the kitchen of 14th of March, I saw everything getting prepared, and I wasn't part of the big decision, but I saw the decision getting prepared and how they do it and how they think. I didn't like it, by the way. So, and I lived with Rafi al-Hariri maybe for 5 years, from 2000 in the election, the first time I worked with him in the election, till 2005, and learned a lot. But I never was in this side of trying to get elected. It's totally different. It's totally different. Or to form the lists, or to do coalitions. It's totally different. Yeah. So, you're right. We need time. We need more time. But we don't have any other solution. What can we do? We cannot surrender. We cannot leave the country. And we cannot do anything. We were learning during the race. We are in a Formula One race. And we are in the first race. The first race in Saudi Arabia, by the way.
Mm.
We are the first race of the Formula One, which is the most professional, dangerous race in the world. Everyone's a professional. We are competing against 21 Schumacher. We are the car number 22. We are still learning. We can drive. We are still learning how to maybe to reach the end, so we can maybe win the second race.
And do you see this as a springboard to 2026? Is this really what it's about?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, so politics is not a temporary thing right now. This is a struggle that will stay.
We have some amazing people. Can you imagine her? Really, really. It's not because she's here. She knows I love her. Can you imagine her in the parliament? Seriously? Can you imagine what she can do in the parliament?
So I'm going to... I can
better,
imagine...
I swear, she is better than the 128 in the parliament now.
I'll get to you, Iman, but through what you're saying. There's something that I think is my bias. I've had so many lawyers running for parliament this time around. Actually, Verena Al-Amir is the youngest candidate, and she's part of the Beirut Bar Association. Nadim Jmayed, I think, is a lawyer. He's actually a successful lawyer in Qatar, if I'm not mistaken. I know he's not Sabatash Tashrin, but he's another lawyer. I've had experts all over Najat Aoun Saliba is one of the most, I think she's an inspiration. Yeah. And the woman has dedicated her life to what she believes in. I had Ziad Abi Shakir, who's in a sort of similar world with her, environment and waste management. And then there's a long list of experts. Lori Haitayan was on the podcast.
Yeah, unfortunately.
She didn't run. Yeah. But I think she really considered it at some point.
Yeah,
she was a candidate, and she's a serious candidate. Yeah.
And she's an energy expert, and I think she's the person you should go to when it comes to energy policy.
Who's a political expert.
Mark Daou, and he's I don't know what word to describe him, but let's say he's...
No words to describe
him, yes. But there's many people that come from professions that I don't think, and you may disagree with me, I don't think they lend themselves easily to parliament. I think they work better in terms of maybe positions that are not political. And I could go all the way here. They could be minister posts. It's not necessarily lower than parliament. It could be actually in the cabinet, or for that matter, an advisory, or even a technical, something that is more procedure than politics. And am I getting anything there in terms of the difficulty of coming from an expertise that's not communal, Sunni issues on the ground, Hezbollah, everything that you have to talk about has nothing to do with your job, that it's more you're being forced to talk about things that maybe that's not what you really want to talk about. You want to talk about procedure and process, and you're stuck with talking politics.
No, really, I didn't have that problem because initially I studied political science and public administration in AUB. And then my dad was like, listen, what type of job do you want to land with this actual degree? And he was like, this is not something that can generate income. So by default, I had to
That's what I want.
So by default, I had to take on another profession that I think structures my trains of thought, how I live, and all of these. And I think these two degrees go hand in hand, honestly. So for me, when I talk about a public servant, I'm very aware of what Weber said on how his policies on bureaucracy and all of these things, because this is something that I actually learned. Yeah. I had to add on to it my professional legal career because in a system like Lebanon where clientelism is based and they appoint you randomly just because you're someone's daughter, someone's wife, and so on, this is not the structure I wanted to engage in or work in. So I do have the background, but I don't see why any profession would hinder you from entering into politics. What's important here, it's not about your profession, it's about the system you're entering into or the system you envision and try to implement. And I believe a lot of these people who are actually running, and you named some brilliant candidates, whether they are in the front rows of this candidacy, or they're working in back office, I assure you, we will all complement each other. What's important to me is how do we move forward with the common good of this country, whether taking upstage or in the backstage. So for me, at least personally, it doesn't matter. I need to put in my vision, or reflect my intentions, or just represent myself in this country in a way that actually gives me that calmness and tranquility that I actually did my role.
So you see your potential, your agency. What you said resonates with me, that you didn't pursue this career here because the system doesn't really celebrate an individual that wants to do it the right way. Mm-hmm. And you mentioned everything that's wrong about corruption or wasta and all that stuff that we talk about, that you want to correct it. The way forward for you is through parliament rather than a position in government where you're leading by example. Because I'm trying to see the appeal through parliament when there's so much stacked against you. And it's for all the reasons Waddah said, time constraints, the inability, let's say, to even, you said Schumacher, there's so many, I mean, yeah,
21 Schumacher and us.
You're racing, and your time duration is too short. And I'm wondering why Parliament is still the right avenue to do that.
She's a lawyer. But Zelensky is an actor.
So in other words,
confronting Russia.
Right, but
so
yeah.
So who said that? First, in Lebanon, it's different. The basic, the standard that we have is different than the rest of the world. There's nothing on earth worse than that. We are living in a black history. I don't think any country in the world has passed in a situation that we are living in Lebanon. And no one is trying to do anything. So what I'm saying is that let's try a new generation of MPs. We cannot go lower. They gave us nothing. I hope that we can say they gave us nothing. They gave us a nightmare that we're living in. So, yes, we still have to learn more, but I think during the last 2 or 3 years, most of us learned. Let's not forget that some of us started the political track 10 years or 15 years ago. We are a combination of fighters, experts, politicians. She knows about the laws, others knows about the environment, others are fighters. We can really have a great group inside to do it all. At least we are honest, we have good intention, we are clean, we are not corrupted, and we will not be corrupted, and we will not compromise. We are stubborn, and you will see what's coming.
The appeal to me is that there's no one behind you guys, that this is really individuals trying to do the right thing, and that's really never been tried. That it could be independent enough. I don't think it's possible to be fully independent in Lebanon, but independent enough has not been tested. And the reason I mentioned Nadim Jmail, not because I prefer him to Ziad Abishek, on the contrary, I think it's looking at a lawyer in parliament with that baggage behind him and all the confessional issues he has to deal with. And then the guy tries to implement something very basic, non-smoking legislation. I hope I'm not saying this wrong. He said it within 24 hours it failed. And that to me is a competent lawyer who can't get something basic done, but is always doing the other politics that are unpleasant. And I just wonder why that would appeal to somebody with the right intentions without that backing, going through that whole mess. But I appreciate the tone and I appreciate the effort. And I think it's noble with or without geopolitical problems. I think it's the right thing to do. And we'll wrap it up with the biggest part, and you mentioned it early on. How do you imagine a system for Lebanon that works better for Lebanon?
We didn't try our system yet.
That's the right answer. Thank you. Yeah. I
So
shouldn't
what-
interrupt you.
what I'm
Yes.
doing- okay, I'm going to win anything.
You get favorable editing. 90% you,
No,
5% me, 5% you.
no, really, it's simple. We didn't try it. They had a tailor-made system, or they used the system for their benefits, and we cannot see if it's a wrong or a right system if we don't bring the right people to execute it.
So for you, it's people, not...
Yeah, of course.
I think, in a way, this is not common language in October 17. I think this is
know.
maybe less appealing to the most, to the base.
I am less appealing, believe me, because they always tell me, don't say everything, just... I cannot.
So it's individuals that can implement a better...
Look, maybe the system is not the right one for Lebanon, but we need to really see it.
It's in place.
Yeah.
Let's start somewhere.
Iman, could you add to what Waddah said? That can you imagine a system that works better for someone like you who wouldn't have to leave the country and pursue their career, that they could stay here and easily find themselves doing the right thing without constraint? What would that system look like?
Let's just say that the moral compass in this country has diverted, and what we consider as norms are not acceptable. I think what Waddah said is that we're trying to do things in a different way now, where we have ethics, where we are bound by the rule of law, where we adopt transparency, where we are clear, where the public good is the focal point of any work that we need to do. And this is the system that we work in. And I think what he said is fundamental. The problem is not the system. It's the people who are, unfortunately, not, I don't know how to say it in a nice way, but...
Don't.
They're just bending the system over to how they want to sustain themselves at our detriment.
I'll give you something to edit. She's saying fucking up the system, but she didn't do.
But
So
you're
edit
both
that.
saying something else too, which is important. You're accepting that even individuals that maybe appeal to us, that are in the system right now, are not able to do their jobs, and that may end up being a burden on anyone. Nasser Yassin, I don't think of him as a bad guy.
No,
Yeah,
he's
she's not about
a
that.
very good
Think of him
guy.
as a good guy.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, he's not able to do his job perhaps as effectively as he imagined, but I don't blame him for that. Neither do I blame the system. Another one who I think is competent, although he's more in the back and he's hiding, I think, right now, Saad al-Shami, who almost delivered us the IMF deal. I don't know if it's going to happen. He may not be from a party that I don't think of the Syrian Socialist Nationalist Party as my kind of party. But I think of him as somebody trying to do the right thing. It's an unpopular move, perhaps, but he's trying. And I think the system is not the reason why he's unable to deliver. I think paralysis from a group today, and that kind of paralysis that goes back in time, over half a century now, is what lets anyone that tries, either they fail in government, or they leave government, or the worst case scenario, they get eliminated. And I think that is still with us today. I haven't been fully sold that this time around there will be a better path forward, just because there are better people in government. But again, maybe I'm being too bleak on that. You are definitely saying what needs to be said when you're battling many things at once, and I have full respect for anyone trying to win favor in this current disaster we're going through, in an election season that is, I think, so complicated for many of us that thought this would be a more unifying journey. But all that aside, I have deep admiration for individuals pursuing politics and pushing forward even when the odds are stacked against them. In my mind, these are the heroes we'll look back on. So, Iman Tabbara, friend of the National Bloc. I got that right. Waddah Sadek, Khat Ahmar, full-fledged member.
Yeah, sure.
And Beirut
I'm proud of
Tagir.
Beirut Tagir.
Beirut Tagir. Good luck. I wish you the best.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
We did it. I'll do an official handshake. Hold on. An official handshake. Hold on. Thanks for listening and watching. And a friendly reminder to support this podcast by contributing through Patreon or PayPal. All links are in the details box. Until next time, I'm Rani Shatah, and this is the Beirut Banyan.